This part of the game is what Heroes of the Storm sells itself on. Team fights and skirmishes occur from minute 1 till the end of the game. But how can you make your team fighting skills come to fruition? There isn't a simple answer. However, there is now a no-nonsense guide to team fighting. Let's start off with the basics. The question that you should first be asking yourself is, should we fight this fight? Often the answer is very obvious, but people can make mistakes, which is fine, but we have to identify the mistake and also learn from it. There's no use going ham and dying 1v5 and then to go on to say team. So when does it make sense to fight? Please note that simply covering one of these points does not mean you should YOLO in. Firstly, you should be aware of who is available to fight on both sides of the team. You may be ahead the whole game, but if you cannot take a fight because you have 2 people backing, then the best choice is to go in and fight the 3v5 anyway. If some of you just questioned that statement, then good. It means we're on the right track. On the other hand, if you can see the enemy is significantly split, then you can also use that as a sign to hard engage. Secondly, take note of your hero level. Do you have a talent advantage? If yes, then you should aim to be more aggressive and take an advantageous battle. For example, sometimes if you're very close to hitting level 10 before the enemy, you can engage onto them knowing you'll hit 10 during the fight and completely turn the tide in your favour. Thirdly, you must be aware of what heroics and abilities have been used by both sides of the team. If I'm playing Genji and I can see that an enemy team has expended their CC abilities and heroics, then I know that I am free to dive into them and use Dragon Blade to sweep the floor with them. This is such an important aspect of team fighting that I'm going to expand on it a bit further. We've come to the point where we will discuss baiting and playing around heroics. Baiting a heroic means that you are applying enough pressure to the enemy for them to use their heroics to save themselves. But at the same time, you are simply expending basic resources. If you can do this successfully, then you are literally removing an impactful ability from the upcoming team fight, which can be hugely beneficial for you. Be careful though, as this can quickly turn around if you take it too far, to the point where you may just get baited yourself. When playing around heroics, melee and diving players, make sure you pay attention here. You must monitor the use of everyone's heroics and abilities during your fight to find that sweet spot in which you can engage. Sometimes you can even engage and dash back out. For example, here we can see Genji E into Malfurion, but he instantly jumps out to avoid any incoming abilities. Okay, so we know when we should be taking fights, but how do we actually, fight? You should understand who your priority targets are. This doesn't mean you all go in and Mocus for Alice. No. This is where a lot of people make mistakes. As tempting as it is, priority targets in a well-organized team will often be in the safest location whilst also making great impact on the team fight. As a tank player, your role in the team fight should be to soak damage and CC the right enemies. For example, here we can see that Dehaka burrows to cut off the enemy and uses his isolation on Oreo, which I must say was absolutely incredible. He has silenced the main hero that is keeping their team healthy. Often the person you are CCing may just be a good kill target too. If you're playing a melee assassin or a hero that dives in, as I've mentioned already, you should look for that sweet spot where you can get into close range and secure kills. Before that point, you should simply aim to poke and deal damage to whoever is closest without expending too many resources, even if it's the tank. Unless the tank can be killed, of course. Range assassins are often also very squishy, so you must take into account your small health bar when pushing for damage. Avoid walking into targets that have good CC tools, because a lot of the time you simply will just be deleted, or your team will have to spend resources in correcting your mistake. Again, it's not wrong to deal damage to the tank, but just like the melees, you should also look for that moment where you won't be focused as hard as you normally would to get the relevant damage in. Support players, man, I feel for you guys. Often you can only really be as impactful as your team allows you to be, which is one of the hard truths of playing as a support. But you're still probably the most important player. Your eyes will be everywhere looking for that split-second moment in which you should be throwing out a heal or a cleanse or whatever abilities you have that decide whether someone lives or not. Try to get the most value out of your abilities, but also understand who the enemy would like to focus. It may even be you, so your positioning is something to consider as well. Not all team fights are the same. They're almost always different, and approaching it as such and adapting is what sets apart the good from the best. Another thing to consider when team fighting is that your comp simply may not be as good as theirs. Yours may flourish in the late game instead, or just you simply won't have the tools the entire game. Which it may be, but going into a 5v5 teamfight over and over isn't the only way to win. You need to understand what your win condition is and actively look for opportunities which puts you at an advantage and punish your enemy's mistakes. Because that's what this game is all about. Who can make the least mistakes and who is actually punishing those. In the end, most of what I said is easy to understand but hard to execute in reality. Newer players especially will find this a little more difficult because they're not aware of what every hero is capable of doing, so they don't know what to look out for. In fact, that doesn't only apply to newer players. For anyone that wants to improve their team fighting, the best way to approach this is by firstly understanding most of the heroes by either playing them as yourself or studying others. Secondly, you should check the talents tab often as it provides valuable information on the enemy playstyle. Stop looking at the stats page, as the only relevant information there is the number of deaths someone has. And lastly, try to understand your role and push the strengths of your hero towards your win condition.